immediately got a call from the White House, basically in essence saying, how dare you go against your president? How dare you go against your party? And that was the first of what would become many of those kinds of decisions where the Democrat elite realized, like, okay, she's not going to be one of the people who just, go along to get along, climb the political ladder to try to advance her political position. I've always been a very independent-minded person. When I was first elected to Congress in 2012, I was surprised by what a huge welcome I got from not only leaders in the Democratic Party in Washington, but, a lot of big figures in the mainstream media and so forth. I didn't have any party support or backing or anything at all as I ran what was a very tough race for Congress. And so, to be invited a week or two after I was elected to go and speak at the National Democratic Convention during prime time was unexpected. Great opportunity. Mm-hmm. But while I was there at the convention, I was surprised because there were people, oh, Tulsi Gabbard, she's the rising star of the Democratic Party and all of this stuff. In hindsight, looking back, it was like, okay, well, I checked a lot of the, kind of the identity politics boxes.
You think it was about diversity? That?
Yes. And I think that they thought that, and it continued, I was invited to the White House Correspondents' Dinner, I think the first year I was there. And I remember walking out of votes one day, and one of my Republican colleagues who'd been in Congress for at least 5 or 6 years before me, he's like, Tulsi, like, what's going on? He's like, I've been here much longer than you, and I've never been invited to that. And I I don't know what this, okay. I don't know. I was like, you go, you can go if you want. Mm-hmm. But I think that they thought that I was going to be someone who was drawn into kind of the red carpet that they laid out before me and would allow myself to be a puppet or allow myself to just be someone who will follow the talking points and kind of cheer the rah-rah lines that everybody uses, but very quickly found, even within the first 6 months of my being in Congress back in 2013, that was not the case. The first turning point, and I get into this in my book, For Love of Country, how when President Obama announced in the summer of 2013 that he was going to come to Congress and ask for authorization to go and launch an attack in Syria, in what would become kind of the first big volley of a regime change war there, I was, after doing my analysis and doing my due diligence, I was the first Democrat to come out very strongly in opposition to President Obama's proposal and gave very well thought out reasons why, both based on my experience as someone who had been deployed to the Middle East twice in the military, but also I served on the Foreign Affairs Committee at the time, and I, did my research, went through all of the briefings, and really actually sincerely listened to the case that they were making and concluded that this was not, that this would lead to yet another quagmire in the Middle East with no clear objective and no case for why this is in the best interest of the American people. Immediately got a call from the White House, basically in essence saying, how dare you go against your president? How dare you go against your party? And that was the first of what would become many of those kinds of decisions where the Democrat elite realized, like, okay, she's not going to be one of the people who just, go along to get along, climb the political ladder to try to advance her political position. And so, going down the path there of my run for president in 2020, I was making the case to the American people in two main ways. Number one is that the Democratic Party needs to go back to being the party of JFK, needs to go back to being the party that really sought to bring Martin Luther King's dream to life. Being the party of the little guy, the party that celebrated free speech. And what I saw through that experience and what I personally experienced was that the Democrat elite had no interest in any of that and were directly hostile to that kind of change that I sought to bring about, which increasingly over time, a recent Gallup poll showed 43% of Americans are not affiliated with either party. They want control and they want power. That is what drives them, and that's what motivates them, even at the cost of undermining the Constitution and taking away basic fundamental freedoms like freedom of speech and freedom of expression. They want to be able to control who has a voice and who doesn't. And they have increasingly escalated their the tools that they are using in order to meet that end. There was a bit of naivete when I made my decision to run for president. I figured like, hey, look, I know this is a long shot. I am the definition of an underdog in this race. There's no way I'll be able to raise the amount of money that a Joe Biden or a Kamala Harris would be able to raise. But I thought at least in this democratic republic, at a minimum, I will have just as fair a shot as anyone on that debate stage to make my case to the American people and allow them to do what we do, what we're supposed to do in this country. They will get to make the decision. That's it. That I discovered that to be a false assumption the day I announced my candidacy. The very day I announced my candidacy, as I was walking up on the stage to make that announcement in Hawaii, NBCnews.com put out a smear piece on me, started planting the seeds of suspicion and doubt, like, oh, there's something weird going on with Tulsi Gabbard. The Russians are really interested in her. And this, of course, became something that was a common refrain, not only for me, Hillary Clinton and many others calling me essentially a traitor to my country, a Russian asset, but it's something, it is a tried and true playbook that they continue to turn to. Obviously, they did it with Donald Trump in 2016. They do it with Tucker Carlson. They do it with Bobby Kennedy. They do it with anyone who they deem as a political threat. And so what I saw throughout that experience on the debate stage, for example, it happened the first debate and in every debate after that. On average, in a 2-hour-long debate, I got about 6 minutes of speaking time. And it didn't matter that after that first debate, I was the most searched candidate of the night, which is what I had hoped for. The same happened again with the second debate. Nothing changed. It just got worse ultimately. So not only limiting the exposure of different Democratic candidates to voters through limited time on the debate stage, but actually working in a concerted way with big tech and the big mainstream propaganda media to control what information voters saw about the candidates that were running in that election, really revealing in real time. You talk about a rigged system. This is what a rigged system looks like. You can say, well, voters are the ones who make this decision. But you've got to understand the context with which they're making that decision. If the information that they're getting when they type in who is Tulsi Gabbard and Google decides to push certain information that is less than flattering at best, but complete false accusations and smears, which is what they did, then, they're tilting the scales. When you have CNN, for example, every candidate running for president at that time got at least one televised town hall on CNN. Most had multiple. I had one. And I didn't find out until a friend of mine called me and they said, CNN has a digital library where you can go and rewatch these town halls of the different presidential candidates. Why isn't yours on there? The Democrat elite are who I hold responsible for their policies because they are either the ones creating the policies, executing the policies, or helping to propagate these narratives that are dividing our country and undermining the foundational fabric that makes us who we are. And yes, they are elected politicians. They are unelected bureaucrats who hold administrative positions in our government. They are many of the talking heads that you might see on some news channels or cable or broadcast television. They are people within, the Googles and the Metas who are carrying out and acting as a tool for the policies and the narratives that the Democrat elite are pushing in our country. They are the George Soroses of the world, those who are funding and pushing these kinds of changes that are so-called progressive changes, but that are actually counterproductive to the well-being and interests of the American people.
Tulsi Gabbard takes on the Democrat elite in this fearless breakdown of their destructive policies and motivations. From the halls of Congress to Silicon Valley, Gabbard unveils the web of power players, politicians, bureaucrats, media figures, and tech giants, who, she argues, prioritize control over the well-being of the American people. She delves into the psyche of leaders like Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, painting a chilling picture of ambition and fear driving decisions that erode the fabric of our nation. But amidst the chaos, Gabbard highlights a growing grassroots movement, a resurgence of everyday Americans stepping up to reclaim their democracy, from mothers rallying for their children's education to communities uniting against policies that undermine their safety and freedoms. She finds hope in the spirit of civic engagement that defines American democracy. Can the people rise above the corruption and fear driving today's leaders? Will this be the turning point for America's future? Tulsi's message is clear. It's time to act.
Without living in their minds, knowing what I know is these are people who are operating out of fear of losing power. Joe Biden is somebody who's always wanted to be president for his entire time. He was in Congress and the Senate for decades. And obviously he ran for president before. Now he's there. You really think he's going to give that up willingly? I've heard the same about Kamala Harris. I know people who went to college with her, and they said even back then, she was cold and calculating and very clear about her ambition and where she wanted to end up. And she's pretty close to being in that place. So when you have people who only care about power and who have created, and I've seen this with members of Congress as well, which is why people end up compromising their principles and their conscience to be able to stay in power, is they see their identity as being attached, and their relevance and their ability to matter as a human being on this world as being attached to this title that they hold. And so it exactly.
That's scary.
It is scary and dangerous, because this is the sort of thing that we see in dictators in different parts of the world. The fear of losing that title, that level of importance, that quote unquote respect that they command, not because of who they are, but because of that title and that position, is what is driving the destruction of our fundamental freedoms in America right now.
Same.
That is exactly where we are right now in the United States of America. To hell with the consequences, to hell with things like our democratic republic and what that is supposed to be, what our founders envisioned for America, to hell with people's lives, careers, reputations, their ability to live in a safe community and raise their kids with a good education. They don't care about the people. They don't care about the American people. They care about power, and are willing to do, it is playing out in real time. They are willing to do whatever it takes in a more brazen way than I've ever seen in my life in this country, so that they can stay in power. Yes, again, it's happening in broad daylight. And the fact that they aren't even trying to hide it, with the fact that you have the DA in New York, Alvin Bragg, and Letitia James, both who campaigned on the premise that if you elect me, we will go after Donald Trump. That was their campaign promise. It wasn't, we will go after him for this egregious crime. They looked for and found ways to be able to charge him with these crimes so that they could keep him locked up in court and keep him off of the campaign trail and away from voters. And this is what we're seeing throughout the so-called justice system that unfortunately has been weaponized and politicized by this administration. I think that there are more people now who are seeing those kinds of meltdowns for what they are, and who have maybe had their eyes opened about what this woke administration, the Biden administration, has actually done to people in their lives and their families and their communities, people who don't pay attention to politics at all. I see, moms rising up in different states in the country starting their own, like starting with a small group of moms who've never done anything in politics, but recognizing like, I got to do something about this for my kids. And this is happening in a lot of different ways, which is the hallmark of what the American democracy is traditionally about. And that's really where the answer is. So no, I see things differently from you in the sense that to say that whatever the outcome of this election is going to be bad is to me not accurate. A lot of people who criticize Donald Trump for his harshness in how he talked about the border in 2016 and even going into 2020 are looking at what Biden-Harris have done in essentially and in a practical way having a truly open border policy, and how it's impacting not only our southwestern border states, but it's impacting major cities, democratic strongholds, in ways that are impossible to deny at this point.